Hello, welcome to another Transform Your Ear Live Talk. I'm your host, of course, Dylan Andrews. It's great to have you guys. If you can, please first put in the comments, the chat, where exactly you guys are watching from. We want to know exactly where you guys are. And the topic of today is we are going to be going through the top 5 ways music theory will give you a highly trained ear. And to help me go through this topic with you guys, I have a very special guest. His name is Dr. Tommaso Zilio, incredible musician, one of the smartest guys I know. Let me bring him in. Hello,
Hello,
Tommaso.
Internet. So nice to see you. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you very good. How you doing?
Very good, very good. So, I seem to have an echo
Yes.
here. Very good. I seem to have an echo. So, just give me a second here because I'm like hitting everything 3 seconds later, and I can't figure out where this is coming from.
No problem, man. Take your time.
But yeah, we're going to talk today about how music theory helps your ear training. So, Dylan, ask me something for your for your audience.
Listening to your echo. So the before we get into the 5 different ways music theory will help you have a highly trained ear, the first thing that I'd love to know is your kind of background with ear training. Where did you start, or when did you start learning and studying and developing your ear?
Well, the I started doing ear training pretty late in time, actually. Meaning, when I started, I was doing essentially only music theory, and I was completely neglecting my ear training. Bad mistake, by the way. You guys don't want to do that. So what happened is that I started to do ear training by necessity, because if you learn only theory, and you never learn your training, you don't go anywhere. The two things need to go together. And as I like to say, music theory and ear training as kind of sister topics. They need to go on together, and they are two sides of the same coin. So I'm telling you that I got it completely wrong from the beginning when I was doing this, okay? Because what I was doing is I was studying only theory because that's what I liked. And I was pretty terrible at transcribing stuff at the beginning. So since I was terrible, I was completely neglecting that part because I was feeling bad. I was trying to do it, and I couldn't even transcribe the simplest pentatonic solo. Or I knew I should have been able to hear my intervals, or hear my chords, or even hear some scales. But no, I wasn't able. I was terrible at that. And since I was terrible, I was doing less and less and less of it. Okay, which certainly not recommended as a strategy. Okay, certainly not the way things should go. And I knew a few people, and this was when I was still taking guitar lessons in my teen years, and some of my teachers were trying to help me with the dictation, meaning they were playing something and they wanted me to transcribe it on the spot, and they were originally just simple melodies. No, I don't particularly like dictation as an ear training strategy. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't, Dylan, but we can talk about that.
Yes.
I know every conservatory, every jazz college does that. I don't think it's an effective strategy, or at least not the way I've seen it. But this was actually making things worse and worse because I was terrible at that. It was mostly guesswork for me, and not informed guesswork at that. So I was feeling worse and worse and worse. So I got to a point where I knew my theory fairly well, but I couldn't transcribe my way out of a wet paper bag. Okay. So, and that's where I decided to change things. Okay. And so what I did was, what I was doing was this: everything I learned in theory, I played it and I recorded it, and I was trying to recognize it. So, for instance, I had all my intervals and I recorded a few intervals. Literally, I was doing MP3s made of like minor sixth, I don't know, major third. Kind of like the apps you find today around for ear training, which again, I don't think it's a great idea either. It's not the best idea, but I had no idea what to do at the time. So I started doing that. And that didn't really work well. But what happened to me is that since I was studying so much music theory, since I was playing everything I was studying, by playing and playing and playing and playing, you eventually learn to recognize this stuff. I mean, you can play the 1-4-5 so many ways that then when you hear it, you recognize it's a 1-4-5. Okay, so I was doing ear training the opposite way, essentially. Okay, so and completely an informal, haphazard way that was just figuring out myself. Okay, but the more I was doing, the more I was figuring out how to do it, until I become fairly good at transcribing things. But it totally was an uphill battle, and if I had some good help, I would have gone way faster. Okay, so I totally don't recommend anybody to go my way. Okay, especially when they have courses like yours. Okay, available.
Yeah.
So everybody listen to this. You just get Dylan's course, and years. I mean, I went the completely wrong way. If his course was available, I would have saved years and years and years of time. So that's how I went about it. Okay, the wrong way. Okay, the wrong, long way.
Yeah. And it seems like that's a lot of people's story in the beginning is when you ask any really good musician how they started with ear training, usually they say, I started doing it the wrong way. At least it was the same for me. I was doing ear training all the like, if I were to list my top 5 mistakes I've made, that's exactly how I was training my ear from the very beginning. You know, and eventually it's just an uphill battle. It doesn't have to be like that. But yeah. So, Tommaso, what do you think is your first music theory tip or concept that can help with ear training and help developing your ear?
Good. So, what's my first tip? Well, the idea is this. We're talking about how music theory can help ear training and vice versa, possibly. Okay. I think the very first thing the very first reason you need to know music theory for is that because we give name to things. Let me explain. One popular thing to do for ear training, which again, there are lots of apps about that, and I don't really like the apps, and I know you, Dylan, don't like the apps either. Okay, but just as an example, one popular thing to do is to play intervals and recognize them, and just say that that's an octave, that's a fifth, that's a minor third, and all this kind of thing. To be able to do that, you need to know the name of the intervals, at the very least. Okay. It also helps to know how those intervals are built, how they work together, what is an inversion of an interval so that you know that a minor sixth invert to a major third. Because you see, they sound very similar in a sense because the notes in it are C and E. Only here you have E on the low side, C on the top. And here you have C on the bottom and E at the top. Okay. So minor sixth, major third, they invert into each other at the same two notes when we switch position. Knowing all these helps a lot, again, if nothing else, because we are giving names to what we need to recognize. Now, the names per se are not important at all. Okay, because people are asking, why do we call it major third? It's just a name. Okay, we could call it the yellow interval, we could call it Colin. Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, it's just a name. The names are arbitrary. The name could also be stupid. Okay, it's just that it's easier if you have a name. Otherwise, you're just, I mean, what will be recognizing an interval if you cannot give it a name and tell me it's that? Okay, there's not much to go on. So you need to know the names. Music theory is also teaching you all the names, so it pays to know some of the basic music theory stuff so that you know the names of what you're doing. So you know, for instance, what's a major chord or a minor chord, okay, and what's the difference between them, or what's an half diminished chord, or all these kind of things. Okay, so knowing music theory, it gives you like a target for ear training. Make sense? The ear training is going from the sound to knowing what's going on musically. Knowing what's going on musically is what we call music theory. So you kind of need that. Am I making sense? Or am I just rambling like a madman?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Definitely.
Okay. So that, okay, it's a very simple thing. It's a very simple thing. We need the names. Okay. Now, to all the audience here, that's the obvious thing. That's why I put it first. Now the juicy stuff comes. Okay. The first one was not great, but I had to put it first. Okay. So let me go immediately on the second way music theory helps help you understand, help you get your ear training, and in general, understanding and transcribing what's going on. Music theory tells you how things sounds in context. Let me explain that. That's a G note. Per se, the G note doesn't really mean anything, right? I mean, what is the feeling of this? Nothing. It's just a single sound. A single sound does not have any feeling. Okay? Once we put it in context or musically, this G note can be played over different chords. Okay? So if this G note could be the root note of a G major chord. Okay, so this now has a meaning because you're playing this note in context. Okay? It could also be the third of an E minor. Now this note, this G note now, sounds different than this G note we had before. I mean, it's still the same pitch, but the feeling of the note is different. Here, the feeling is fairly happy. Here, the feeling is fairly sad. Okay. If I could play this as a major third or an E flat major chord. It's still the same G. The feeling is different yet. This could be the fifth of a C major chord. Still the same G, but the feeling is different. Or a C minor chord. So still the same G, but the feeling is different. It could be the seventh of an A seventh. Still the same G, but the feeling is different. Or the major seventh of an A flat major seventh. Okay. It could be the ninth of an F ninth chord. And we can go on and on and on. Okay? Meaning that this very same note will have different feeling depending on the chord. Okay? That's not something that is obvious. That's not something that is even logical. Okay? If you don't know this, it's very hard to guess these from first principles. Okay? It's something that you need to learn. Okay? The same note feels different depending on the chord you put under. Okay? If you know what feeling goes with this kind of interval degree, however you want to call it, I'm going to clarify exactly intervals and degree in another live stream I'm going to do in a couple of days on my channel, by the way. Okay. Then you can tell what is this note. If it's the seventh, the minor third, the fifth, the first, whatever. Okay. So knowing theory here tells you that a single note has no feeling. The feeling changes depending on the chord, and then you have to do all the association between the feeling and the actual interval between the note and the chord, and then you can recognize it. If you don't know theory, all this makes no sense. Okay, so you need to know theory to understand this, how things work in context. And all the music you hear, it's in context. You never hear a melody or a note, etc., without an underlying chord. whether the chord is explicitly played or not. Sometimes the chord is implicit because you already heard it, so you're just imagining it, okay? Or you know the song, or there are other things suggesting what the chord is. But you never really hear a single note in isolation, period. Okay? So you need to understand how those things work in context. Otherwise, you're going to get stumped because the same note now sounds different from this to this. I mean, this note here and this note here. Again, same note, but the feeling is completely different. Okay? So it tells you also, tells you what to listen, the feeling, but don't be swayed by the feeling. Actually use the feeling to understand what the note is. This is all very abstract, but once you get and once you go and see how it works, it's easy and it really helps you. Okay, so that's way number 2 on how music theory helps. It's gonna get even better.
And
Really.
for that, Tommaso, that is something that I love to talk about, is how the notes change around the chords. But I'm curious, do you always hear the notes in relation to the chords, the intervals? Or do you sometimes hear scale degrees no matter what chord is going on?
Both of them.
Same.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't want to make it too complex today. Yeah. But yes.
It's a rabbit hole.
Yeah. Again, the pitch per se has no meaning. It's the pitch inside a structure that has a meaning. Okay. Again, that's not because we want to make things complicated. It's just because that's the way your ear works at the end of the day. Okay. Yeah. Your ear tries to find a context for all those pitches. So the chord is one, the scale degree is another. Mm-hmm. Okay. On the other hand, the scale degree works if you have a scale. You may not have a scale. Okay. You could be composing completely in chromatic scale, and that's hard to hear degrees in there. So, and that's why, by the way, some people really don't like all the chromatic avant-garde stuff, is because they rely only on the scale more than on the chord. Okay. Yeah. It's not their fault. They were listening to music that was training that specific skill. But you can listen to other music that trains you to not listen things through a scale, but only through a chord or through other things. And then the chromatic music makes sense. That would be a big topic there. But for most music that we're listening to, okay, scale works perfectly. So you're hearing both things at the same time. You're hearing the pitch in the scale. So at some level, your brain knows if it's the first, second, third, fourth pitch of the scale, the degree. And you also hear the pitch in relation to the chord that is playing in that moment. So you hear that kind of contrast in color, if you want, at the same time. Again, it's not that we want to make things complex, but your ear is doing a complex operation when it listens to all those sounds, and it uses all this information to create a feeling and an understanding of the music. So to understand, music theory is just the explanation of how your ear works at the end of the day. Okay. So it's not really mathematical, or, I mean, there is some mathematics, but it's not really mathematical or physics or the theory of sound or stuff like that. It's just what do your ear does when we send in those pitches. Your ear builds all this structure called a scale, and the structure called a chord with the pitch that's actually sounding in that moment, and tries to understand the pitch inside that structure.
Do you find that it's necessary to know what the chords are in order to hear the relationship, or is it possible to just hear that it's a second without even knowing what chord is being played?
It's possible both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, all the three ways is possible, meaning you could hear only the pitch in the scale, and you would be able to transcribe everything. You could be hearing only the pitch in the chord. You'll be able to transcribe what's happening in that moment. You'll have to see what happens in the next chord. Okay. You could be hearing both of them. And actually, different people, I found, I did a bit of testing here and there, but different people seem to use slightly different strategies. And this seems to correlate with the kind of music they like. Okay. So lots of people who like classical music or pop, incidentally, okay, seem to work more on the scale degree. Lots of people who like fusion blues seems to work more on the chord than the scale degree. Everybody can work on everything, of course, but they seem to have trained those skills more than the others. Okay, right now it's just a vague observation. I mean, I wouldn't want to go and have to, how can I say, prove this thesis in front of anybody yet, but there seems to be some correlation. Okay, so I mean, and it's kind of obvious if you think about it, because classical music or pop music have a very strong scale impression. They're in major or minor, occasionally a mode, and they really work a lot on the scale degree. And that's what we do when we just kind of music. Why, if you think about fusion, for instance, they tend to hold a chord and play a lot over that chord, and they tend to go on a completely different chord and play over that chord, and so on and so forth. So, and the new chord may not even make sense in light of the original key of chord. So they tend to modulate a lot and very suddenly. So it doesn't mean they don't have a scale or there are no scales degree. It just means that it's easier to hear that music if you think notes on chords, as opposed if you think notes on scales. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that the music you listen to kind of shapes the way your ear is working. And this also explains why some people like some styles and don't, because some styles use a different kind of way for your ear to understand the music. And so if you're not used to do that, that music feels like a bunch of random sounds to you. It's very typical for people who listen to a lot of pop or classical music to not like blues or to not like fusion, and vice versa. They just speak different languages if you want. It's totally possible, by the way, to listen to both styles, understand how both styles work, and be able to switch the way you have to work. But it's less common, let's say. Okay. Anyway, that's a long story there. But yeah, you could go totally through the scale, and actually I go to the scale usually.
Right.
Okay.
Do you think, though, based on someone's style of music that they like to play or listen to, do you think that should affect how they should train their ear? Do you think depending on your interest, how you go about training your ear should be different, or is it pretty uniform, the same for everybody?
Okay. If we were trying to make them effective at that specific style of music, then yes. But I don't think that's a good goal. I think one of the goals of both music theory and ear training will be to widen your horizons and not just keeping you where you are right now. So I think everybody should train everything, period. Okay?
Yeah.
Because maybe I'm in the minority here, but I think people really like their style of music and rarely spend time listening to other styles of music. And it's very common to have people say that their style of music is the best and everything else is horrible. But at the same time, if some people listen to a style of music for a while, and it's not just a fad, it's not just something like, okay, this song came out the other day and so everybody's listening to it. But if for a long time people have a style of music with multiple generations of people playing in that style of music, there must be something good in that. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. And if you think the style of music is just random sound, it's not the problem of the style of music. The problem is you. So I think that you should train scales degree, definitely, or scales on the chord, definitely, and try to understand as much as music as you can. And try to make your ear as versatile as possible. And not just restrict yourself to one style. You could compose only in one style, definitely, but you definitely should not limit your understanding to only one style. That's what I think. Maybe I'm in the minority. Okay,
I agree with you. Yeah.
but you agree with me. But people,
We're
you'd
both
be
the minority.
surprised. I mean, especially about jazz, and especially in both directions. Okay,
Yeah.
people who listen to jazz tend to listen only to jazz, and people to listen to everything else tend to not listen to jazz. And I think there is very good jazz, and there is also very bad jazz, by the way. It's not that something is jazz is good. There's also a lot of very bad jazz. Okay. And it's worth trying to understand what's going on if you're not a jazzer. And if you are a jazzer, it's worth trying to understand everybody else. If you listen to jazz, but you don't like metal for it, and then I'm saying specifically metal because that's the style they hate, you are missing a big part of music, an important part of music. There is more to metal than it looks at first. Okay, it's not just very aggressive music. Okay,
Yeah.
if you listen to metal or blues and you don't like classical music, you're missing a big part of it. And I'm not saying you have to become a classical nut and listen to Vivaldi day in and day out, but at least understanding what's going on will be good for you. Okay, and this always goes through listening to some music that you don't like at first, because you have to understand, if you don't like it, there is a reason you don't know how to listen to it. Okay, and again, I'm not saying any specific song or any specific thing. There's always the bad song. Okay, and people like to make examples of those, but there is a lot to be discovered in any music style, more than you think. And so I don't think we should limit ourselves to one exercise or to one style of listening.
Yeah.
That's my thinking.
I agree. And I think too, a lot of the times is when I listen to music, sometimes I'm listening to music just to enjoy it. And then other times I have my like student hat on where I'm listening to it just to study and learn and go through. And that's when I start to listen to a lot of music that I normally wouldn't listen to or would enjoy. And like you were saying, at first, I may not like it, but when I start to understand it more, the enjoyment goes up, And I think listening to music from the perspective of I want to learn something here, you get so much more. And I think you learn and become a better musician, guitar player even quicker, helps develop your ear. And like you said too, is if you genuinely don't like it, if you understand why, that's so much more valuable than just saying, yeah, I just don't like it.
Yep. Exactly. And see, here's the thing. It's people ask me why they should even learn music theory. First, if you want to be a musician, you have to, because music theory should just be called music. Okay,
Yes.
it's what we do, guys. I mean, we call it. It's a long story why we call it music theory, and that's a misnomer because most of music theory is actually practice. But anyway, but the real reason is this: is that if once you understand music theory, and then you can see what's going on in music, and you understand it, you enjoy music so much more. Okay, the more you know, the more you enjoy. The legend they tell you, the myth they tell you is that no, if you want to keep the mystery, and the mystery you can enjoy the mystery, and it's bullshit. Sorry. It's the more you understand, the more you enjoy music. Simple as that. Okay. And whenever you see people being snobs, like, oh, this music is not good, I mean, 99% of the time is simply that that specific person does not understand that music. People who understand music, really understand music, like much more music than you think. They don't tell you. Okay. I mean, they don't tell you because then they will have to tell you that some pop music is good, that some rap is good, then some then some trip hop is good. Okay, uh, there's some dubstep is good. Okay, and people really don't want to hear that. The moment you say there is some good rap around, I'm like, no, you don't understand anything about music. No, I understand more than you. Okay, I can distinguish the good one from the bad one, and the good one is really good. That's why they don't tell you. Okay, but believe me, people who understand music and enjoy their life much more. Okay, in this sense, and that would be just this would be worth understanding music theory just to get that. But then on top, you also be able to write music, learn music faster, remember music. I mean, everything becomes easier with an instrument in your hand and in making music. So I think it's worth it. Okay. Let's go on the third way why music theory helps you in your ear training. And that is actually something that really applies to everybody who's trying to better their ears. Sometimes when you're listening to a piece of music, you cannot hear everything that is going on. This is for a very specific reason, is that the musician, the composer, is not showing everything. He's trying to hide some things because he's trying to create an atmosphere around the sound. Okay, I'm going to explain what I mean in a second with a specific example, okay? When you cannot hear exactly what is going on, if you know your theory, you can reconstruct what's going on in the background and use it. Okay? So what do I mean here? Let me make this example. I mean, if you're transcribing a pop song, typically all the lines, all the instruments are in front of you. You can hear the bass, you can hear the guitar, you can hear the drums, you can hear the keyboard. It's certain that something is very hidden. Okay, but suppose you're listening to an orchestral piece. I'm gonna make 2 examples right now. Okay, not all the lines are evident. Right now, I'm thinking of the intro of Game of Thrones. Everybody knows that, no?
Yes.
You guys know the intro of Game of Thrones, no? Right? You guys know the intro, no? If you listen to the piece, sometimes you have this little rhythmic part. Okay, and this rhythm part changes with the chords. The rhythm stays the same, but the actual note change when you go to the piece. And sometimes you have the melody, no? Right? Toward the end of the piece, you have another melody, and then in the background, you have the rhythm part at the same time. While before the melody and the rhythm part were alternating, you had one or the other, at the end, they go together. But there are lots of other instruments coming in, playing the chords, playing other notes in the background. At a certain point, the rhythm part is still there, but kind of goes lower in volume, and you can hear the attacks of the part. You can hear that the part is in the background, but it's really hard to hear the exact notes. Okay? If you want to transcribe that piece, the only chance you have is to know what are the chords of the progression, and you can transcribe them very easily by transcribing the bass part, and that can be heard. And then try to reconstruct what's happening, knowing that he's using mostly note of the chord when he's building that rhythmic part. Make sense? So you can hear if it's going higher or lower, but you cannot hear the exact pitch, not with precision. But if you know what are the notes of the chord, okay, and if you can distinguish when the notes are consonants, so they are notes of the chord, and when they are not, so they are passing notes, etc., you can reconstruct it, and you can actually transcribe it. So sometimes you need to know music theory because you cannot hear exactly what is going on, and you cannot hear every single note because there are too many notes being played at the same time. Okay, am I making sense here?
Absolutely.
Okay, I mean, I challenge anybody to listen to Game of Thrones and tell me what a bassoon is doing. I can hear a bassoon in there. Okay, there are 2 actually. Okay, at least 2. There could be 3, at least 2. But good luck in transcribing the exact part. But if you know what a bassoon is normally doing and what are the chords, you just know what's happening. Makes sense? Another example, you guys, all of you have seen Harry Potter, right? Everybody has seen Harry Potter, okay? And you know that little piece of music, something like that, no?
Yeah.
It goes in Harry Potter. Okay, this is not a melody, but it is a melody because you can hear, right? You can hear the melody, but there's more than a melody. Okay, there is more than one instrument playing at the same time. There are 3 notes being played at the same time. How would you know there are 3 notes played at the same time? And how would you transcribe the whole thing? Well, you will transcribe first the chords. So we'll try to understand what chords fit every part. Okay. And then you will rely on music theory to tell you what's going on. Okay. You can hear that all the notes are moving as opposed to only one, right? It's not this. Okay, so if you can figure out that the top note is a B and the chord is an E minor, and then all the notes are moving, that's an E minor chord, and then you will move all the notes down and up, okay? And then you will reconstruct all the parts. You cannot hear directly, for instance, the part that starts with G. Or I mean, maybe you can if you're a monster. Okay, I can't. Okay, most of the people I know can't hear that part, and I can prove it because if you ask them, sing me that part. If you hear it, sing me that part and only that part. It's really, really hard. Okay, if you cannot sing it, you're not hearing it, because if you hear it, it will be very easy to sing. Okay, so. But since you know what's going on, because you can tell what is the chord, how the notes are moving, etc., you can use music theory to write every single part. Okay, and this is true for all the rest of that. Okay, if you go back and listen to that orchestral piece, you also realize that there is a moment where the trumpets are doing this. Okay, and in the background, they're gonna hear lots of things going on. Stuff like that, okay? And those are all the woodwinds doing kind of a flourish part in the background to give atmosphere. There's no way you can transcribe all of that. You can transcribe the profile, so you get the top note, and then you know those are other 3 parts harmony, and then you can transcribe the rest of the 3 parts harmony knowing the chord. But there is no way you're going to be able to hear every single note in that part. It's too complex. Simple as that. Okay, too complex, too fast, too low in volume. So if you want to transcribe those things, you need to know some music theory to help you, because you can easily hear the top note of the melody or the bass, but all the voices in between, you may have to reconstruct from theory. And then you may have 2 or 3 different options, and then you can go and listen, okay, how is this working, and is this like the original? But you need to have some help.
Yeah. And I think too, especially with people that don't really know music theory that much, they're relying on just strict trial and error, where you listen to something and you try to find it on the guitar. And this, I still do this, this kind of never goes away unless you have perfect pitch. But without that knowledge of music theory, you're going to spend just so much time trying to figure out what you're hearing. Music theory really is a time save, because you can just think, okay, well, 2 notes are playing together. Well, it might be up a third, might be up a fifth. Let's try up a 6. It just saves you so much time, because you can choose the most likely situation of what's going on, what the harmony is, what's going on. Like you said, sometimes it's just without music theory, you just can't transcribe it, because you have to. Sometimes you kind of have to just make educated guess.
Yep.
On what you know, and that's okay, right? But without it, it just becomes impossible.
And sometimes you have general information. So, for instance, you could listen to a piece and you can instantly tell if it's harmonized in triads or in 7th chords. You may not know every single 7th chords, but you can hear that sounds like 7th chords. I mean, there's a difference between which is triads and which is 7th chords. Okay, with a 9th occasionally. So this means that if I can hear the difference, even if I don't have anything more precise, I already have an advantage in transcribing, because I know I don't have to search for triads. I can try 7th chord or vice versa. Okay. Same for other things. Sometimes you can hear a chord is a tonic, not a subdominant or a dominant. You don't know which tonic chord because there's more than one, okay? but you can tell the function, or you can tell other things. You can know that the chord is major, but you don't know if it's the 1, the 4, or 5. Okay, and sometimes you have this kind of partial information simply because your ear picks up on that, but it's not good enough yet to pick up on everything that is going on. But that at least restricts the possibility. So then you can transcribe faster. So it's good to have this partial information. And people tend to discount that a lot. Okay? But the ability of knowing, for instance, if a piece is harmonizing triad or seventh chord, that can be acquired very easily by listening to some pop song and some jazz, and that's the difference. Okay, makes sense, and it saves you a lot of time. Just having this kind of general, the feeling is different. That's one thing. But then the other thing is, like I said, it's easier to transcribe the top note and the bottom note. It's all the notes in between that are a problem.
Mhm.
But if you know your bass note is C, and the singer on the top note is singing an E, C and E, well, most likely it's a C major chord. It could also be an A minor chord in first inversion. So C, A, E. And then you can go by trial and error and see which one of those is right. Okay. I mean, could it be other things? Yes, there's always more than one possibility. But I mean, those will be the first two to my mind to try. And 99% of the cases is going to be these. So you don't have to transcribe every single note of the chord or instantly know what the chord is. That's a desirable skill to have, but you don't have to. You can just go, okay, that's the bottom note, that's the top note. Based on what I know of music theory, what chord could it be? What chord contains those two notes? And then you just try.
Right.
So that's way number 3. Music theory helps you. Okay. Let's go on way number 4. Way number 4, music theory helps you. Lots of people today study ear training using, again, those horrible apps like, let's listen to this sound and let's associate. Okay, so if you hear these, it's a perfect fifth. If you hear these, it's a major sixth. Honestly, I find that incredibly difficult to learn it that way. Okay. I find it much easier to learn to generate the sound first. So for instance, one thing I like to do is this. I'm taking a scale. Okay. And then I play the scale in thirds, meaning the first and the third note, and the second and the fourth note, and the third and the fifth note. So just play intervals of third. Right? And I play it a few times. It's a great technical exercise, first of all. And then it's also an ear training exercise because I can sing it, not right? Then I can do it without the guitar, even if I'm completely out of tune. Okay. Yes. But then later, when I hear thirds, I know they are thirds because I play them. When I hear some music that has some thirds, melodic thirds, I know those are thirds because I played them, I sang them, okay, and I internalized them. And I can do this for every other intervals. I can do it with sixth. Okay. Yeah. So it's much easier to generate the sound. And by the time you learn to do this technically and play it on all the scales, patterns, and maybe sing a little bit with that, you internalize the sound of that interval. Because you're doing it every day. This could be your warm-up. Okay. And by the way, this could be if you're playing melodies, but the same thing works if you're playing it in harmonically. Those are tenths, which are thirds, essentially. And you hear this sound, and you learn that those are thirds, as opposed to, say, octaves. Okay. And again, after a while, I mean, you cannot really sing those. And you could sing the third, okay, but you can hear them, and so playing the tenths or the thirds or playing the sixths, little by little, you learn to hear them. Since you know you're playing sixth, you know what's going on. And then when you hear the sound, you know what it is. Okay, this is part of studying music theory, playing the intervals on your instrument, or playing chords on your instrument, or playing sequences on your instrument. And this goes from the simple stuff like this to more complex stuff where you go, I don't know, and do all this kind of little sequences, etc. And then you learn to recognize those in actual pieces. Okay, so music theory helps your ear training because you are generating all those sounds you're supposed to recognize. Those sounds become part of your skills. Okay, and then you internalize, and then when you hear them, you recognize them. Now, those were examples more on harmony, but the same is true for soloing, for lead playing. Okay, if you play your pentatonic, if you only thing you want to do is to play bitching blues solos, or people do, and it's great. The pentatonic is 5 notes. Okay, if you apply yourself, you can learn those 5 notes in a week. Meaning, what do? Play something, then sing it. First you play it, and then you sing it. Okay. Then gradually you move into singing and playing at the same time. And there's a bit of hit or miss, trial and error, but okay. And you learn to do this, and eventually, when you hear a solo, you just need to sing the solo in your mind, and your finger go in the right place automatically. Okay, it's really not that hard to do if you apply yourself and just try to sing what you're playing. So again, you are generating the sound first, meaning learn the scale pattern, learn what scale pattern works on what backing track, connect the ear, sing it, essentially, play everything twice, and sing it the second time. Gradually move into singing and playing at the same time. Now you got it.
I think too, Tommaso, with everything that you're saying, the key there too is application. You're actually taking what you normally do, or what you want to be able to do, and training your ear on it, as opposed to just listening to intervals isolated over and over and over and over. And that, in my opinion, just listening to stuff like that over and over and over is the hardest way. One, because it's just so boring to me. It's just not, the main reason we want to develop our ears, we want to become better musicians, is because it's fun. That's a big core reason, and I'm not saying that 100% of your practice and everything is going to be fun, but I would like it to be as high percentage as possible, and actually to see, well, one of the most fun things is to see actually how what you're practicing is actually going to be used. And when you're not sure how it's going to be used, then that can be really tough. That can be really demotivating, especially with a lot of the times as guitar players, a lot of those apps and everything are piano. And not saying that listening to piano is bad or anything, but as guitar players, listening to and using our own instrument is always going to be more valuable.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just more fun. What you just did, that looks way more fun.
Well, it's more fun than listening to an app, definitely. you see that's the thing I don't get. It's like all these craze about the apps. Everybody, give me an app. I want an app. Is there an app for doing that? And I find it incredibly boring. Okay, like you said, like the idea of grabbing my phone or using the computer and have to have an app play something at me, and I need to tell the app what is it. No, why? No, it's just I'd rather play. I'd rather play the stuff, and I will learn it faster anyway. So yeah, But I don't know. People like the apps today. So and that's, I mean, the problem of people not having great ear comes before the apps. But the apps made everything worse, in my opinion, not better.
I agree.
Also because once you learn to, and by the way, that's going to be my fifth point, incidentally. Once you learn to recognize those intervals. So let's say the app plays you on an interval, okay? And you recognize it as a major third. And then the app plays you another completely unrelated interval, okay? Okay, and you recognize it as a minor seventh, and so on and so forth. Okay, yeah, what do you do with that? It gives you the illusion of understanding. Like, I can recognize all the intervals. But then I get a lot of students writing me like, Tommaso, I learned to recognize all the intervals, but I'm not better at transcribing. And I'm like, duh.
Right.
What did you expect? I mean, why are you coming to me telling me that other people's advice doesn't work? I told you not to do it. It makes me mad in a sense. Like, I mean, totally happy to help, but this doesn't work because the people will tell you, once I recognize the interval, I can recognize a melody by listening to every interval in the, that's incredibly slow, nearly inapplicable in real life. Okay, totally not how most musicians think either. Most musicians will think as degree in the scale instead, like you were saying, not at interval between every two notes of the melody. You need to learn things in context. And you cannot know what context is unless you know a little bit of music theory. If you don't know what a scale is and what a scale degree is, and how more or less those degrees work, what are the important one, the stable one, the unstable one, etc., it's going to be an uphill battle to understand all these. You cannot... In the last 5 years, maybe slightly more, we had this craze on YouTube about everybody has to learn intervals. First of all, with intervals, they mean like 3 different things: scale, degree, actual intervals, other stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
But even then, it's not, that's not how it works, you see. That's not how it works. And when people tell you to learn the intervals, don't. The craze is now slightly mutating and is becoming less learn intervals. It's becoming more and more learn your arpeggios. Sure, I mean, I'm not saying no, learn your arpeggios. I mean, but if you don't put the arpeggios in a context, in a key, in a musical situation, you could learn to play your arpeggios, sing your arpeggio, even recognize your arpeggio. You're not going to do much with that. I'd rather tell you learn your scales, because at least once you learn your scale, you learn all the notes in a key and not just 3 like in an arpeggio, okay? Still you cannot just learn a scale. You should learn all the context around it. But comparatively speaking, from this point of view, I'd rather you learn a scale than an arpeggio. Okay. Well, everybody on YouTube right now is saying, no, scales are completely useless. Don't learn scales. Don't learn modes. Don't learn. This should be the last thing you learn. This should be the last thing you learn. Are you joking?
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. Okay. I don't understand the thinking behind that either.
Oh, look, I can tell you what's the thinking behind that. They want more views to the YouTube channel.
Yes, there you go. There you go.
That's the logic. That's the logic.
I was thinking of more. Yeah, how does that help me in music? But yeah. No. I completely agree with you. Hot subject, and I think that is a big problem with why, in a lot of areas, but in ear training and music, it's those hot topics that people push that are getting the views. That is a lot of misinformation. Or it might be the right information, but they're telling us to do things in the absolute wrong order. Like you just said, completely backwards. Like scales should be last is that seems silly to me.
The thing is that you have a lot of those teachers on YouTube telling you that to do your training, do this, grab an app and do the intervals. Okay. which is a very easy answer, and people are happy to hear it. But then in practice, they spend years and years doing this interval thing, and they don't get anything.
Right.
Or you have other people. There's me, there's you, there's other people. We're not the only one, of course, telling you, no, you actually have to study your scales degrees or have to study things in context. So you have to do those exercises. And people don't like our answer, usually. I mean, some do, of course, but many people don't like our answer. So they go back to the other people. But people who follow our answers learn way faster and then are able to apply what they do.
Yes.
Okay, so it's that's in a sense, if you want, is the problem of social media. It made answers that sound easy get spread around, even if they're wrong. Answers that sound complex, even if at the end of the day they're simpler and they help you better, don't get spread around as much. So yeah.
To the ear training apps, other advice like that, like you're saying, it seems really easy and quick, and people gravitate that way more. We're way more quickly. If we were to say, yeah, do the scales, do this, learn your music theory, that seems harder in a longer term. And everything I found is advice that seems easy in the beginning is always really hard long term.
Yep.
And vice versa. Hard in the beginning, always easiest long term. You know.
Yep.
And I'd rather give the right advice.
all the time, 100% of the time, it doesn't matter if there are two people listening to me.
Right.
I'm always giving the right advice. Sorry. I mean, what I think is the right advice, of course, doesn't mean I'm always right. I try to be, okay? But I always give what I think is the right advice. I don't care if it's unpopular, because that's what I do. And
yep.
That's what I like to do. What would be the point otherwise? I mean, the thing is that even if our advice was more complex or it would take more time to learn, well, that's normal. That would be okay, because the thing is that you can do a lot of things with ear training. You can do a lot of things with music theory, okay? You can compose in many different styles. You can compose in many different ways. You can transcribe so many different things with different strategies, etc. There are many things you can do, so it takes time to learn. Okay, one of the reasons why the idea of the interval became really popular is because you can learn all the intervals in a few weeks and recognize them more or less reliably. But you cannot do anything with that.
Yeah.
But hey, you got that nice check mark on your list, like, I learned the intervals. And it's not doing you any good. And there's plenty of advice like this, like what scale pattern should I learn, or learn the arpeggios, not the not the scales. You can get a nice check on your checklist, but you are not a better musician. But hey, the satisfaction of putting down the checklist, it's really okay. People really want that. The problem is that once you have like 20 checks in your checklist, and you are still not able to do what you want to do, that starts to be demotivating. But you don't see this immediately. You see this a few years down the road.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. While if you want to become a good musician, you should definitely decide what kind of music you want to play, what kind of skills you want to have. Ask a teacher also. Find a good teacher and ask them what you should learn too. That would be good, because you don't know at the beginning what you have to learn. Pick me, pick Dylan, pick somebody else, okay? But pick somebody, okay? Ask them, believe them. That's the other problem. Other people ask me, and they don't do what we tell them to do, or they don't believe us. Why should I tell you something that is not true? Come on. Put in the work and get the skills you have, okay? Some people have been reconstructing the ways that the old composers learn music. Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, all those people. It's incredible how differently they learn respect to what people teach today. Okay, and there was a big reliance on scales and scales harmonizations, and not such a big reliance on arpeggio, not at all on intervals. Okay. And it was way more effective. Those people learn to improvise all those pieces. You see, all the sonatas, all the fugues, etc., were meant to be improvised. Okay, all the counterpoint stuff. It's improvised. Those are all tricks for improvisation. They're shown today as like a bunch of rules you have to learn. They were all a system of training how to improvise this stuff. So you need to hear the stuff and put it in, transcribe it in real time while you are composing it. It is possible. It's actually normal for them. Okay, and we went worse and worse and worse in teaching that. Okay.
Yes.
This instrument, the electric guitar, was born as an instrument for improvising. Okay. That's what it is. We had the blues players using this first. Okay. We need this kind of training to be able to improvise. We cannot just rely on let's learn the intervals or stuff like that. It's not going to be helpful. Okay. We need to learn how to improvise on this instrument. Otherwise, the alternative is learn how to read music so well we don't need to improvise. If you want to do that, great too. Okay, but still, the training is different than what people think. And I think a lot of people on YouTube are just giving the easy answers because they want more views, or sometimes because they don't know better. I know how this sounds. It sounds very arrogant. I know. But that's the way it is.
And yes, and I think even the latter that you said is that they don't know better is a lot of the times. I think a lot of people will just say other things they heard someone else say that they respect, that person just heard someone else say, and it's just kind of, things just get spat out. And one thing that I think should be taught a lot more, especially when people are first starting ear training or guitar or whatever, is to have patience. I think that is one of the most beneficial things that you can have. Is if you come into ear training or guitar or anything by thinking of, okay, in 3 months I'm going to have this trained ear and I'm going to have all my guitar stuff down and all these different things. If you're thinking in short term, I think you're thinking very, very incorrectly. It's just setting you up to fail. No matter who tells you what, it's setting you up to fail. Like become this in 30 days or 60 days usually doesn't work out too well. So having a lot of patience will do you a lot of good. And the students that I have that do have a lot of patience, I find that they learn faster. Funny enough, they actually get they actually get there quicker, thinking it's going to be a longer term thing. But yeah, and I know me and Tommaso, we can talk about this.
Oh yes,
on and on.
But what you say is perfectly correct. People who have patience and actually do the exercises, and don't overthinking, just do the exercise, they improve faster. If you start to overthink it or trying to go at it only by pure logic, it's not going to happen.
Right.
It's not logic. Okay. Most of music theory or ear training is not logic, because your ear does not do a logical operation when it hears sounds, and we need to understand how your ear sound. So it's not logic. You cannot get to it just by thinking about it, and the only way to realize it is by practice. Yep. Nothing strange with that. This is true for practically everything. Okay, so just sit down, do the exercises. If your teacher is any competent, the exercises are designed to take you there, even if you don't see how it works yet. You will eventually. Just do the exercises. It will work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And do you have any final remarks or suggestions about anything, Tommaso?
I think that's what pretty much it. Just practice.
Yep. I think we covered.
Pick a good teacher you trust. Do what they say.
Okay. Yep. That served me well.
Yeah, it served me well too. And again, the teacher could be me, could be Dylan, could be somebody else. You don't have to necessarily take lessons. But once you pick a teacher, stay there. Okay, don't go around 7 different teachers and try to do everything everybody says, or pick a teacher but keep watching YouTube and then do whatever YouTube tell you. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work.
Yes.
Completely. Go around, ask people, take your time in choosing a teacher, but then just follow what I say. So it makes everybody's life easier.
Yes, completely agree. And I think you have also a free resource to share with everybody.
I do. Could you show it in? Thank you. So, this is a guide on how to learn the notes on your guitar. Now, if you want to learn any music theory or if you want to learn any ear training, you need to know if you are playing a C or an E or a G when you play something on your guitar. You have to, okay? Nothing, there's no other shortcut. So, it seems like a complex thing to do. Seems like I need to learn all the notes by heart on the guitar. It's going to take forever. It's going to be super difficult. Okay, it's not difficult if you train it the right way. In this ebook, I'm showing you a few exercises. You do those exercises for 5 minutes a day, 10 if you're an overachiever, okay? But just 5 minutes a day. In a few weeks, you will know all the notes on your guitar. And the best thing is that you don't have to memorize them. You just need to do the exercises. Just do the exercises 5 minutes a day, and you will learn all the notes on your fretboard. And once you've done it, it's done it. You've learned them, and they are there forever for you. Instant recall. You don't even need to think. You just know what notes you're playing. Guaranteed. Just do it. If you go at the link there, musictheoryforguitar.com/guitar-notes, it is completely free. You go there, you get it, it's free. There is an ebook. There are a few videos with me showing the exercises. Just get it.
Awesome. And I also put a link in the chat too, if you want to just click that, make that easier. And I also have a resource as well. So I have a video that I created on the 5 easy ways to practice ear training. So if you are wondering exactly what exercises you should use, exactly how you should practice it, and what you should go through, this is a great way to get you started. Or even if you have been training your ear for a while, this is something that can continue to improve your ear and get it better. And just like Tommaso's, this is completely free. There is also a link in the chat for this as well. But get over here. Tommaso, thank you so much for joining me and giving us your wisdom on all the music theory and all the knowledge you have. Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Until next time, guys, I'll see you at the next live stream.